So a few weeks back, I was scrolling my timeline at like 1 a.m., the way you do when you should be sleeping, but instead you're doom scrolling AI Twitter, and one line stops my thumb mid-scroll. MCP is dead. My first reaction was panic. I had just spent 2 weeks wiring up MCP servers for a little automation pipeline for this channel. Research tools, script drafts, my Notion database, all of it stitched through this one protocol Anthropic put out, and now the internet is telling me the thing I just bet 2 weeks of my life on is already in the coffin. So today we're talking about it properly. Is MCP actually dead? Or is this one of those AI Twitter main character moments that blows up for 4 days and means nothing? Stick with me, because the real answer is way more interesting than either yes or no. Quick backstory so you understand why I even care this much. If you've been watching this channel, you know I've been building out this whole AI content production system. Hyperframes on one side for the visuals, a bunch of automation scripts on the other to run the channel's research, scripting, and publishing, all stitched together. When I first heard about MCP, honestly, it felt like magic. The pitch is simple. Instead of writing custom code every time you want a model to talk to a tool, you plug it into this one standard protocol, and your model can read your files, hit your APIs, control your apps, one connector to rule them all. So I did what I always do. I went all in. I connected 8 or 9 different MCP servers to my setup, GitHub, my file system, a couple of scrapers, a database connector. I was so proud of this thing. I thought I'd cracked it. Then it fell apart. Here's what happened. The moment I had more than 5 or 6 servers connected, my model started forgetting instructions I'd given it 2 messages earlier. It called the wrong tool, it hung. One time it just refused to do anything until I restarted the whole session. I was troubleshooting this at 2 a.m., genuinely questioning if I was just bad at this. Turns out I wasn't the problem. What was eating my model's brain was the tool definitions themselves. Every server I connected dumped its entire tool list into the context window before the model even started thinking about my task. So a huge chunk of what should have been thinking space was just instruction manuals nobody asked for. Then the load balancing nightmare. I tried deploying this on a small cloud server, thinking I'd finally run it properly instead of off my laptop. MCP at the time was carrying so much session state that the moment I tried to scale it, even slightly, things broke in ways I didn't have the vocabulary to describe in my error logs. So when I saw MCP Is Dead trending, my gut reaction was, yeah, obviously. I'd felt that pain personally. This thing is held together with tape. But then I went and dug into where the MCP Is Dead narrative actually started, and that's where it gets interesting. It kicked off back in late February. An infrastructure engineer named Eric Holmes wrote a post with a title that basically became the meme. Something along the lines of MCP being dead and the plain old command line being the real winner. His argument wasn't that connecting tools to AI was pointless. His point was that for a lot of jobs, a boring, battle-tested command line interface is just more reliable and easier to compose than a whole new protocol layer sitting on top. Then an investor called it trash on X, because of course someone did. And word got around that a major AI company's CTO was quietly pulling workflows off MCP and back onto plain APIs, apparently because something like 70% of the model's context window was getting swallowed by tool definitions before any real work even started. Painfully relatable. That's basically the exact wall I hit at 2 a.m. with my 9 connected servers. Here's what made me stop and rethink everything. While all these obituaries were being written, MCP's actual usage numbers kept climbing. Not flatlining, climbing. Anthropic's own maintainers reported something close to 500 million downloads a month across the main SDKs by the middle of this year, with both major SDKs individually crossing 1 billion downloads total. Google Cloud rolled out fully managed remote MCP servers. Every major dev tool you can name, JetBrains, Cursor, Windsurf, Replit, built support for it directly in. And the kicker? Anthropic's direct competitors adopted the same protocol instead of building their own competing standard. That's when it clicked for me. You don't get angry blog posts about a toy nobody uses. You get them about infrastructure people are now stuck depending on. Nobody writes a furious 2 a.m. rant about their microwave. You write it about the thing your entire workflow now runs on and can't easily rip out. The backlash wasn't proof MCP failed. It was proof MCP had become load-bearing. Now, I'm not going to pretend the complaints were made up, because they weren't. My own failure is basically a case study in what went wrong. Context bloat was real. Every connected tool eats tokens before your model does a second of actual thinking. And if you're running a dozen servers like I foolishly tried to, that overhead becomes impossible to ignore. Statefulness was real. The original protocol carried a lot of session baggage, which is fine if you're running one server off your laptop, and a nightmare the moment you try to scale it behind a load balancer. Hi, that was me. There was also a serious security scare in April. Researchers found a design flaw that could let attackers run arbitrary commands on vulnerable setups, exactly the kind of headline that makes any security-conscious team nervous about installing a random community-built server. And one of the most annoying parts for someone like me, there was no real trusted registry. No proper NPM style, verified home for MCP servers. You'd Google it, check GitHub stars, and hope you weren't installing something sketchy. So yeah, a genuinely rough couple of months for anyone building on this thing. Here's what convinced me to stick with it instead of abandoning ship. The maintainers didn't get defensive. They didn't do damage control on Twitter. They shipped a fix. On July 28th, a new spec dropped, and by the maintainer's own description, it's the most substantial rewrite the protocol has had since it added proper authorization. The headline change, MCP is now stateless at the protocol layer. Session tracking is no longer baked into the core. There's header-based routing now, so load balancers can do their job without peeking inside every request body. List results can be cached the normal HTTP way instead of forcing a fresh fetch every time. And that heavier stateful feature that used to sit in the core spec got moved out into an optional extension, so people who don't need it aren't forced to carry the weight. They took the exact list of complaints from the spring, my complaints, essentially, and rebuilt the foundation around fixing them. That's not what a dying project does. A dying project gets abandoned. This one got rebuilt from the ground up, in public, with receipts. This is the part I found most relatable, because it explained my own confusion perfectly. There are two completely different groups having two completely different conversations and calling it the same protocol. On one side, individual creators and small teams. People like me, running a handful of servers off a laptop and feeling every ounce of friction directly at 2 a.m. We wanted something lightweight, and for a while, we got way more ceremony than we bargained for. On the other side, platform teams and enterprise vendors, the people responsible for authentication, governance, audit trails at real scale. That crowd wasn't complaining nearly as loud, because the heavier, more structured version of MCP was actually built for exactly what they needed. They finally started getting the identity model and observability they'd been asking for right around July. Same headline, two totally different experiences underneath it. So where did I land, personally? I didn't rip MCP out of my pipeline. I scaled it back. I stopped connecting every tool I owned just because I could, lesson learned the hard way. And I'm slowly bringing servers back in now that the July update addresses the exact pain points that broke my setup in the first place. The honest truth is, what died earlier this year wasn't the protocol. It was a fantasy. The idea that you could bolt any tool onto any model for free with zero engineering trade-offs, that fantasy deserved to die. The real infrastructure underneath it didn't. And if you zoom out, this is a pattern we've seen before with every piece of tech that looked like it might become the A standard. The ecosystem grows, new requirements show up, the rough edges get sanded down in public, sometimes painfully, and eventually the thing stops being something people argue about and just becomes something people quietly build on top of. Nobody makes a viral post about how their Wi-Fi router works. That's the end goal. So is MCP dead? The hype cycle around it, maybe a little. The actual protocol? It's getting used more than ever. If you've been building with MCP, or if you gave up on it after your own 2 a.m. breakdown like I almost did, tell me in the comments. I want to know if I'm the only one who nearly lost it over 9 tool connectors. See you in the next one.